So I wanted to thank you. I have a couple. Last time I was here about a month ago, I spoke rather quickly about a lot of different topics, and I wanted to start out with a couple today that are. I don't know how many of you saw 60 Minutes on last Sunday, but there was a fascinating piece on racism in the military, and I thought we'd spend a few moments on that because, from a legal perspective, it's very important, and obviously for many other reasons. That's a very, very important issue to talk about. We've talked about sexual discrimination, but what we've seen in the military is institutional racism as bad as anywhere else. And I don't know if you saw this piece, but I took some notes on it on Sunday because I was absolutely depressed about what I'd seen. And actually it started off with General Austin. And we've talked about General Austin because he is now the first African-American Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, and he said some unbelievable things. And throughout the course, he had said as you climb the ladder, you still get doubts if you're a black person. There are always going to be people because of what you look like that will question your qualifications. And he talked about a couple of amazing things. One was that even though he was a 4-star general, when he used to give briefings at times, he used to have a white person, a Caucasian person, do his briefings for him because he thought that the people who would actually be listening to these briefings would give that white person more credence than him, an African-American individual. And he just had said every time he climbed the ladder, he found that there were issues. He gave one time where he was in civilian clothes, and he was the 4-star general, and somebody, he said, I would go someplace with my staff, and we were wearing civilian clothes. Somebody would come out to meet the general, and I wasn't the guy they walked up to. So if there was, General Austin, and then there was a white guy, they would go up to the white person, assume that he was the general, and that General Austin was not the general. We in that piece, they also talked about a fighter pilot who basically is now the first person, General G.Q. Brown. He rose from a fighter pilot to become the first African-American in history to head the Air Force and become a member of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Well, after the incident occurred with George Floyd, General Brown went on Twitter and he got a video, and he said, I am just tired. He said, the world I live in as an African American, there's a world that I live in as an African American, and there's a world that I also live in as a minority inside the United States Air Force too. He said these two worlds, are just wrong. There are two worlds. He actually has been discriminated in the Air Force just because he's been an African American. And we see this with the statistics. And the statistics are that 2 out of every 5 African Americans do not trust their chain of command to address racism, bias, and unequal opportunities. 3 out of 5 believe they do not receive the same benefit of the doubt as their white peers if they get in trouble. Actually, we found out that somebody who is African American has a 57% greater chance of court-martial or discipline than a white guy. So that's 1.5 times greater, 50% more than a white person would have it.
Wow.
And then they talked about how fighter pilots, and how fighter pilots still only constitute 2%, African Americans, 2% of fighter pilots. And that's exactly the same percentage that was there in the 1990s. Okay, so tell me, 1990s, 2021, 2% and 2%. African Americans represent 17% of all the active duty troops in the military, but only 8% of the officers in the military. You can't lie with these statistics. You can't kind of sugarcoat them. So this is an issue, and I think it's institutional racism that not only obviously pervades our society as a whole, but pervades the military as well. And I'm sure a lot of our audience, those veterans who serve the country, probably have experienced this type of thing throughout the course of their. And, quite frankly, Doctor, I'd be curious as to your experience in the military, and I don't know if you experienced the same thing or not.
Oh, that happens quite a bit. You have people, we get back to this thing with Martin Luther King, and I always love to get back to that particular viewpoint. It's, we judge people by the content of their character. And I've had people who were white in the military that I got along with extremely well. And we actually did a lot of things together. Actually, one of the generals that I was working with arranged for me to get the Legion of Merit medal from President Obama, because he said, we were together, so, doing so many things. And but then there were some other people, where if I was in plain clothes, where they would say, I remember being down in Texas, and it depends on the state too. I think that has some bearing on it. But I remember someone saying, sitting down with two other soldiers that were African American, and they said, "Why don't you boys go over to the other table because we need to have a larger table?" And he didn't realize at that point I was a major, and so I took my ID out, and he said, "Oh, we've never seen a black, a person, an officer down here like this, and I'm sorry, I didn't know." And I said, "That's fine, just go to the other table." And but what it does to people is that it really gives them, we have these things about stress and high blood pressure and all that. That feeds into the medical conditions that people have, I think, and we don't pay enough attention to that. There's studies on fire engines and ambulances running through neighborhoods and what that does to people as far as their stress level and physically how it impacts them, and that over the course of a lifetime, I took a walk today. It was like an 8-mile walk, and there were some people who were walking by, and some people just moved to the other side of the thing because I was walking with another African American doctor. And so we were walking, and and this in plain clothes. So I had my one of my military jackets on, but you couldn't see it unless you looked at the back. And this one white guy walked by me, and he said, "Thank you for your service," and he just kept walking. So I think that it really comes down to the content of people's character, their beliefs, and how they are going to interact with you. And we have got to get past that stage. We have got to get past this. I was talking to one person once, and I said, if you did Ancestry.com and saw all of the lineages that you have, the question I would have for you after looking at that is, how much of yourself do you hate? What percentage of yourself do you hate once you do that? Because we all have different, origins, and we all came from the same tree, that God made. So we really have to start thinking about that in a long term. But I think it has devastating impacts on some people. They'll leave the military, or they'll feel that there's no place here for them, so they feel dishonored. And and after going through battle, you were in Iraq, you were in Afghanistan, you were in Vietnam, you were in World War II. Just to have that kind of perception of you when you get back is just astounding, when you were putting your life on the line.
Well, and that's what's amazing. When we go through the statistics that I saw in 60 Minutes, and I wasn't going to even talk, I had other topics to talk about, but it was shocking to me to see the statistics themselves, because you know what? Everybody's life, it's all on the line with the military. So when you go into battle or you go defend your country, you have as great a risk as dying as the white man next to you. Yeah. So why is it that there's a 57% chance more that you're going to get in disciplinary trouble? Or why is it that you're not going to have a chance to become an officer with as much possibility as a white man? Or why is it that there are 2% of all of the fighter pilots who are African American? And that's gone for 20, 30 years now. So I'm hoping, and I would hope that with General Austin and with General Brown, one leading the Air Force, one leading the Department of Defense, that we're going to see institutionally some changes, not only with regard to racism, but I'm hopeful that what Ms. Smith, Glenda Smith, the executive producers, worked so hard. Sexual discrimination has been a major problem. Sexual attacks on women, and we hope we're going to see these changes in a sea wave. But I don't know. I've been saying this since I've been a kid. I don't know. It gets to be upsetting, but I'm hoping that we could see some institutional changes, and that we can, as you said, judge ourselves by the character, who we are, not by the color of our skin. So
and Stephen, that's a really good point, because it actually abuts something that you are very intimately involved with, and that's people who have their claims through the military. And I can tell you that there is discrimination, because I'm a physician myself. I have sat and watched people be evaluated, and I'm looking at them saying, you're really evaluating this person very differently than if they were white. And sort of blowing off everything, and it's like, oh, you have a headache, so don't worry about it, it's going to go away. And and we know this happens in the medical field with discrimination. When there was one doctor who had COVID who passed away in Indiana recently, and she was a doctor, and they didn't realize that she was a physician, and they were just not paying attention to her, and not so I think that is something, in the disabilities claims arena. I think that there is probably a disparate impact. I would love to see the data on something like that, how what percentage of claims get denied for people who are of color versus people who are white, and I think there is a discrepancy there.
Is there a mechanism, Doctor, that somebody can, especially with all the statistics that are being run now because of the racism in the military, this gets to the same point with veterans.
Yeah.
I mean, our audience.
That's right.
Is there a way, do you think, that we can? I mean, I must tell you, in the past, we were very proactive about the change of certain laws and the sexual discrimination. Is there a way we can contact our congressmen or senators and say, hey, we want some statistics to see how disparate the treatment is between black individuals and white individuals in a disability process?
I think they should. You should. I think it should really push for that, and especially with General Austin being in his position and saying the things he said so far, and you have people in the ranks who are looking at that. But I think that that's something that people really, really need to look at, because I remember my father. He never had any disability claims. He was a World War II veteran, and he was on an incendiary team. So he used to tell me stories. My parents got divorced when I was really young. He was a steel worker, working in steel mills and that kind of thing. And he would sit. I remember him sitting there, and as a child, I didn't realize what he was going through. But he would put his head in his hands, and he would start telling me about a story. And he would say that these women and children would run out this building, and they would just set them on fire. And they didn't realize there were women and children until they got out in the streets. And he said that was part of what they were doing during World War II. And when he got back, it was sort of looked over, just get back to work and get, and so, they didn't really have any recourse back then. And especially, for African Americans, it wasn't, just don't even show up, that kind of thing. So I think that is going on to a large degree, and that's why we have so many veterans on the street with mental health issues that aren't being addressed. So I feel that the VA could be doing a heck of a lot of a better job, and especially with the disabilities evaluations for people.
Well, to our audience, I would suggest, and I mean, it always starts with us. It starts with the people who make the effort to do something. We saw this with so many things we've talked about over the last couple of years, with the sexual discrimination, with the Ferris Act, which was that act that prevented malpractice cases if you were a military person, with so many different things.
Yeah.
And I think that our listeners have to get out there and make an effort to get some information about the disability claims and statistics. I'll certainly make some inquiries myself, but I think that's a very important thing to remember. I briefly wanted to just digress or talk about a couple of other things. I only have a few more minutes, but a couple more minutes. But this week, there was a story just yesterday. You remember that boat, that kind of the duck that went on the sea, and the Marines Marines passed away, and that happened in July 2020. Killed 8 Marines and a sailor. And just yesterday, they concluded that negligent installation, faulty parts, and breaches of protocol resulted in decades-old amphibious and salt vehicles filling with water, tipping over, sinking 385 feet beneath the ocean surface.
Wow.
Out of the 16 crewmen on board, only 7 survived. 2 officers were relieved of duty over the accident, and, quote, the reliefs marked the second time in a year that senior military Marine Corps officers have been punished for fatal accidents investigators determined could have been prevented. So we're concluding with our time. Unfortunately, went extremely fast.
Yeah.
But the point is, it's terrible because people are put at risk every day because of negligence of their officers, sort of like what we experience in our practice of law and what we do in our practice. So
I'm going to speak to Glenda because I think we need an hour with the topics you have, because you are so, I mean, I'm serious. This is critical information that our veterans need to be looking at, and we need to be involved in that whole process. So I just want to say, legally speaking with Steve, we are so happy to have you every time we have you on. Make sure that you call this man. And just say your phone number only, just real quickly.
312-781-1977. A very good year, 1977.
1977. Sounds like a good wine. Okay, stay with us. Stay with us.